Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do a whole new entry here, yet again based on one of your newer suggestions. This one has to do with a very fascinating cryptid. Not only does it have a great name associated with it, but it could also be tied to a supernatural aspect. So I'll talk about that more later on, very briefly in fact, because it does have to do with a subject matter I don't really like mentioning too much, and that's with regards to skinwalkers, but more on that later on. But it also has to do with a cryptid that is found in an exact location. You know how much I love those particular tales too. The idea that one can visit that exact spot and have a good chance of running into this cryptid. So lots of great info to share here, including some photos apparently of its sighting and then some modern day sightings too. Has to do with this. In fact, you're looking at it now, and it's known, get this name, it's known as the beast of the land between the lakes. Great name, no, when it comes to this cryptid. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the fascinating info associated with this creature. So what is this beast of the land between the lakes? Well, it's purportedly a half man, half wolf-like creature that roams a specific spot of land there in between Kentucky and Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, that's why it's called the area, the land between the lakes, because essentially it's a large body of water, a peninsula that was created, and in that spot, it's spanning a couple of miles both in length and width, you have this piece of land that also almost seems to be isolated. So in that specific area, that's where you can find this creature. So I'll talk about that more later on too, as far as more encounters associated with it. But first, the physical characteristics of this beast of the land between the lakes. Half man, half wolf. That's essentially how it's been described. This is something that apparently towers over others, at least 7 feet tall. Imagine something involving 2 powerful legs, huge body, also the face of a wolf, large fangs, and then these piercing red glowing eyes as well. That's essentially what this creature looks like. Just imagine a caricature of any kind of wolfman that you would see in any kind of horror film, and that's essentially what this beast of the land between the lakes is. But interestingly enough, it could be other type of physical characteristics too, because it's a shapeshifter. If you go a bit more with the side that it's supernatural, and I guess I'll talk about that here, if you go with that aspect, this could actually be a skinwalker, and that's because the legends of this creature go back far, far away. In fact, this was when French explorers and traders began coming over and then going into this type of land. And when that happened, they heard the tales of this monster, some kind of shape-shifting Shawnee shaman who apparently roamed villages during that time period. But he ended up abusing his powers, and when that happened, he became a spirit. Somebody, I guess, killed him, or he died from that abuse, and so his spirit is said to roam that location, and that's essentially how it's tied to the skinwalker, because it seems to be more in the lines of a shape-shifting Native American, some type of entity that just roams those lands and is not good news. It definitely causes a lot of harm to people that try to come across it. So if you go by that supernatural aspect, the fact that it's a shapeshifter, they can take on any kind of physical characteristic. But if you go more on the lines of the fact that it's a werewolf type monster, then that's essentially what it looks like. Now, as far as why it got there and so forth, there's the idea of this. Apparently, sometime in the 1800s, in the early 1800s, that's when people started reporting that they would see this creature there. Not only that, but they would actually see evidence associated with this creature as well. So whatever this beast of the land between the lakes was, it landed there. Who knows how it got there specifically? I was reading some information too, apparently, although this one seems a little bit more far-fetched, about some man that was cursed and then would turn at nightfall into a maddened state, and when that happened, then he would become a werewolf, and then he had genetics that would pass this type of traits down to his son, and it was passed to another child afterward, and so on over the years. That seemed a little bit more far-fetched, but instead, if you go by the notion that it was just a creature that just happened to land there somewhere off in the distance, who knows how far back, that's where it stays instead. And it makes sense, because this is a perfect area for it to have a natural isolated spot. So again, this area, this land between the lakes, is a very, very large peninsula that you could have something there roaming about by itself on its own, and you would not have too much in terms of interference. In fact, that location there is more of a what's considered a national recreation area. So it's going to be left as itself, as is, the 4T type environment. In other words, it's going to be left as is going forward, pretty much. And so that has to do with the environment surrounding it, and then the fact that nothing can be built around it as well. So here is a perfect location for this beast to be able to just roam there. And roam it has, because again, all these tales of encounters with it, not just with that, but also evidence of it, ties to this. Apparently creatures, other natural animals that are there, bison, when they were roaming back in the day, deer, other type of herds as well. When they were there, people would find evidence of these massive animals just lying there dead, half eaten, almost as if something ripped them open and it just started eating them, using some kind of massive claws as well. And it was mystifying people because there was nothing there that could truly cause that kind of horrific damage. But there it was. There were these bison, there were these deer, there were these other type of creatures there that they would find evidence of, all these hunters, whenever they roamed about those areas. And then that's when the people started to get actually afraid of what was occurring there. Interestingly enough, too, the animals there also knew of the presence of this beast, because whenever one of them would go missing, like in this case a calf would be reported missing, it would be attributed not only to the beast, but the areas there, the people that roamed the land and had these animals within their care, they would state that these herds would reportedly stay together, like they would form a close formation, knowing that this creature was out there, knowing that it just attacked one of their own. And so they would do this peculiar activity where they would just stay together and form a formation to make sure that they could protect themselves, and it just caused everyone else there to again be mystified by these actions. And then as far as sightings, like real sightings that people have seen, some of the modern ones have to do with this. 1973, in fact, there were some university students from Murray State University who were there at the land between the lakes. There they were in that piece of land, apparently just camping there. They were there with their VW microbus as well. And on that fateful night, they were in the woods just hanging out, and then all of a sudden one of them had to go take a leak. And then when he did so, he reported that he felt as if something was truly watching him. Not only that, but he heard something that was almost making a sniffing sound around that area too. He didn't mistake it for anything else. The way he described it, it was something very loud that was sniffing around, knowing that his presence was there, and then also just trying to just spook him out, essentially. And so when that happened, he went back to his friends. He told them about it. They thought it was something else, like a natural animal, like a wild hog or some other type of deer or something else. But then they in turn heard it too. In fact, later on that night, whenever they were in their campsite, they heard large shuffling sounds, as if something was moving in between all the fallen leaves surrounding them. Definitely loud, definitely big as well. And anytime they tried to make sure they could catch a glimpse of it, whatever they saw, though, was apparently moving very, very quickly. And so they decided that was it. They're going to get out of there. And so those university students went to their car, again, their VW microbus, and then when they went so, they started driving away, and then that's when they heard apparently a howl, a huge howl, an unnatural sound, something again like you would imagine like a wolf, but multiplied by much larger factor. And interestingly enough, and this was something that scared me, this howl instantly turned into some kind of mocking laughter too. It knew that they saw it. It knew that they knew it was around, and it was taking pleasure, in fact, from the fact that they were so scared of what was happening. And so instantly, of course, they had to drive away as quickly as possible, and then they saw it. Apparently, this thing started to chase them, and they described it just as I mentioned earlier. A massive figure. It looked like a werewolf-type man, and there it was catching up to them, in fact, no matter how quickly they drove. And at one point, apparently, it took its massive claws and then grabbed the back of the VW microbus and held it, as even though it was on drive, even though it was trying to get away from them. But eventually those claws weren't enough, and this VW microbus broke free. And only later on, when they were back on campus, that's when they saw that these claws, sure enough, something there had essentially torn into the back part of the cover of their car, and that's where it was holding that bus in the meantime. So that's at least one of the more modern day sightings too. Plus, apparently, there was a motorhome of a family that some mutilated bodies were found, but and it's been attributed to this beast as well, because the fact that there they were, and there was no evidence of anyone else like human-like that apparently caused any kind of damage there. But apparently that was also covered up afterward by the authorities, if you believe it, because they didn't want to have that location, at least they didn't want to have the bad publicity causing problems later on with people visiting that location. And one other thing that I wanted to mention too has to do with this. You're looking, in fact, at a photo of the beast itself. This is apparently an actual photo of the beast of the land between the lakes. I love it when I find these kind of things here, because it's great to showcase actual evidence, what is purportedly evidence, but still actual evidence of the cryptid monster here. So very fascinating stuff. What is that in the middle? Is that it itself? Is that something there that's scurrying away, or just happens to be caught in kind of like a mid-surprise? Whatever that is apparently a photo of the beast of the land between the lakes. And one last thing I wanted to share too, I found this in another page. Apparently there were some weird forts that have been found in that area too, in that peninsula. No one really knows why they're there, who built them. Maybe some people have that info, but it hasn't been widely shared. But there's this. Apparently somebody, either the government or some other department, built these forts in order to be able to ensure that they have something done about this beast, because of the calamity, because of the horror that it was causing all of these decades. Here you have something now as far as an action to try to stop it. But these forts, whatever happened, it just didn't get the job done, and so they were abandoned. So if you go to that location and you see those forts, that's apparently where it's from. In fact, as you'll see in that picture, this beast uses these forts just as a way to claim its territory, to ensure, the way I read it, almost like it was that it wanted to make sure that it marks its location, it marks its territory, and it knows that it beats everyone else that was trying to capture it or do something else to it. But what do you guys think as far as all this great info? Fascinating stuff, no, when it comes to the beast of the land between the lakes. If you're brave enough, if you want to go to that area, that peninsula, maybe camp out a night, there's a good chance that you'll hear it. You're going to hear its unusual, very loud growl, or its howls at night. Or worse, you're going to see it as well, starting with those piercing red eyes that people say stare at them from the far distance. And then, of course, there's even the worst part yet, which has to do with a very close encounter. But if you're brave enough to do so, you can go there to this day and camp out. And so if anyone has done so, anyone knows that location, maybe someone that has tried that before, please post those comments below. Anyone from that area too, maybe family members that have gone to that location and reported strange sights or sounds. It'd be great to hear what your comments are as well. All right, everyone. Thanks again as always. Take care.